Okay, well, hello and welcome to our YIN class. We're really going to be finding moments of stillness where we can just drop in and be more introspective in our practice. The main physical focus we're going to be seeing today is the low back and the hips. So just a couple props are needed. I have just a couple blankets and some blocks might be optional. So whenever you have your props, meet me on the mat and we'll jump right in. We're going to start with just a little bit of acupressure to start to bring us into ourselves. So I like to prop a blanket underneath my sits bones, which just gives a little bit more support to the low back and the hips. You might find that nice as well. If you've got space and you prefer to sit up against the wall, that can also be really helpful. But we're going to start just on the forehead region. So I'm just going to use my 4 finger pads and just a gentle tapping starting right in between the brows and working your way out towards the temple, and then across the brow line and back up to the middle of the forehead. So just a gentle tapping, and if your space feels inviting to do so, maybe even closing the eyes and just start to focus on the sensation of this gentle tapping right along the skin level. And maybe take a couple deep rounds of breath just to start to transition the body into this more introspective practice. Just being more aware of the body and the emotional sensations that might start to come up. Now, once the next time you work towards the temples, we'll just take this under the eyes towards the bridging of the nose and then back out again towards the temples. So for this one, I like to just use 2 finger pads, whatever feels the most intuitive and inviting for you. As you start to move through this gentle acupressure, really start to focus on the breath. So as the movement becomes more mechanical, just allow your awareness to start to drop inward more towards the breath than any of the external things that are happening around you. Our lives are often busy and chaotic, so taking some time for ourselves to drop in can be really therapeutic. And just take a couple more rounds. And then whenever you're ready, just let the hands fall into the lap. Take a moment just to sense the gentle tingling sensation right beneath the skin layer. And let's take 3 deep breaths, inhaling through the nose, filling the body up with air. And then as you exhale, audible sigh through the mouth. 2 more breaths just like that. Last breath. And before we get into our first YIN posture, we're going to do one more acupressure spot. So you kind of palpate and feel along for the clavicles or the collarbones. We're going to fall just an inch or 2 beneath that. And again, I'm just going to use the 4 or 3 finger pads, whatever feels more comfortable, and just gently tap right outside of the sternum. It might be nice to kind of just let the arms lazily hang on the side of the body. Maybe again, if it feels okay, to just close the eyes and bring the awareness back to the breath and the physical sensation that you're creating with this tapping. And if the tapping feels a little overstimulating, perhaps you just hold the fingers down, pin the skin tissue with a gentle pressure, and just breathe into that tactile sensation. Feel the shoulders relaxing, the jaw softening, even the muscle in the eyes behind the lids letting go. And then again, just let the arms fall into your lap. Take a moment to notice that tingling sensation And let's take 3 rounds of in through the nose, out through the mouth, cleansing breath. And before you open your eyes and we start to transition, take a moment to appreciate any shifts you notice in the body-mind now versus when you first arrived on your mat. Hopefully feeling a little bit more in tune with your inner awareness. And let's try to hold on to that sensation throughout our practice today. Whenever you're ready, gently flutter the eyes back open. If you were sitting against the wall, come back onto your mat. And if you had a blanket underneath of you, I'm going to invite you to remove that. We're going to take the blanket or one of your blankets and we're going to roll it up like a burrito. So go ahead if it's folded and unfold it just so you have a nice rectangle amount of fabric, maybe like 3 feet by 2 feet. And then go ahead and kind of tightly roll it up like you would a burrito. And we're going to use this to really support the hips and the low back as we do some supine asanas. So I'm going to drape mine right across like the middle of my mat. And then go ahead and right up against the tailbone and then start to come all the way down onto your back. Now, once you're on your back, you might have to adjust it a little bit, but you just want to find that that roll is right underneath the tailbone area and just above the sits bone, so it's really supporting the hips. Once you have all of that, we're going to come into a butterfly shape for the legs, so supine Baddha Konasana, letting the bottom of the feet come together and the knees flare out. Now, if the hips are really tight, specifically the front of the hips, and even with this blanket of support, it feels too much, feel free to grab those yoga blocks and slide them underneath the outside of the thigh or underneath the knees. So rather than having to actively hold your legs in this stretch, you're using more props to support you, so you can just passively stretch and let the props do all the work for you. But if the blanket feels like it's enough support for the hips, feel free to just let the knees fall open. And we're going to be here for a couple of minutes. So again, if it feels safe in your space, I invite you to close your eyes and come back to the breath. For this first effort, we're just going to breathe natural. What I invite you to do is notice where your breath begins and ends. Maybe if we've been more stressed and anxious, the breath feels more in the lungs or the upper part of the body. If that's the case, I want you to just even imagine or visualize what it would be like to let the breath go further down the body into the abdomen or even to the pelvic floor. Just this sense of nice deep breaths. And really allowing your awareness to linger in this very moment. Softening behind the eyes and the jaw, even the toes and the fingers. And not changing or adjusting anything, but just simply observing. Noticing the natural rise and fall of the belly or the chest. The air gently flowing in and out through the nostrils. Feel your body softening or surrendering into the floor beneath you. Feel the gentle pull at the hips, finding a gentle release. And let's take 3 more natural breaths here. And then feel free to use your hands. I really like to place my hands on the outside of the thighs to help bring the knees back together, especially after holding an open hip stretch like that for a couple minutes. The hips might not want to rebound on their own, so just giving them a little bit of support. We're going to keep everything as is, but we're going to come into our next shape. So bring your right foot to more towards the middle of the mat rather than being aligned with the right hip. And I'm going to give you a couple options here. If crossing the knees and pulling them to the chest doesn't feel quite comfortable either on your abdomen or on your hips, feel free to take this exact same thing in a more figure 4 or like a supine pigeon posture. But if you're able to cross the knees and that feels okay for you, go ahead and cross your left knee over your right. Then we're going to bring the knees into the chest, and you're going to take your right hand to grab hold of your top left foot and your left hand to grab hold of your bottom right foot. Keeping the knees stacked as much as they can, so we're more in this supine shoelace shape. But again, you can always come to the figure 4 if that just feels more inviting into the body. You may notice a little sensation in the outside of the left hip. So again, we're going to be here for a few minutes, so finding something that you can linger in without inviting in too much extra stress. So soften the feet. Your arms are supporting, so they're an extra prop-like. And then just feel the weight of the pelvis melting into that blanket roll beneath you as the knees just keep melting closer to the chest. Once you feel supported and you can drop into that sensation of staying still, let's come back to just simply observing and noticing the breath and how that feels. I invite you to soften through the shoulders. Sometimes when we bring the arms in, we tend to bring tension into the upper body. And see if you can't let all of that tension dissipate. Melt away as you soften even more. And take just a couple more rounds of breath here. And we're just slowly going to let go of the feet, and we're going to come into a supported happy baby. So unraveling the legs. Feel free to reach for the ankles, or if it's accessible, we're just going to switch right to the other side. So if you prefer the feet on top of the left, reach the hands to grab hold of the feet. Let the knees just fall in towards the chest. Once you feel supported, go ahead and soften through the eyes and come back to the breath. If you notice your mind is drifting or focusing on other things, I just invite you to come back to observing the breath. To really allow yourself to drop into yourself and to take this as an opportunity to really self-reflect. And let's take about 3 or 4 more breaths here. And then start to gently let go of the feet. Let the feet start to find the floor. And we're going to come into one more position. If you feel like the blanket has moved underneath of you, feel free to readjust. We're going to come back to another release for the front of the hips. So the iliopsoas region, I'm going to invite you to bring your right knee into your chest. Now you can hold it with just the right hand, or you can feel free to hold it with the right and the left, whatever feels more comfortable. We're going to extend the left leg out long. Now before you settle in too much, I invite you just to kind of gaze down towards the left foot. And just try to make sure the left foot is in the same line as your left hip, and the toes are kind of up towards the sky. So the leg's not kind of falling open towards the left. We're keeping this nice plumb line from the hip all the way down towards the middle toes. And then once you have that, hug the right knee in a little closer towards the chest and extend your left leg just another half an inch maybe until you feel a nice release through the front of that left hip, with just the gentlest of compression sensations on the right side. Once you have that, feel free to drop back in and come back to noticing the breath. And take a couple more breaths here. And then just gently start to slide your left leg in. We're going to take the right leg across the left and let the legs kind of fall open towards the left. So you're coming into this supported supine twist. And we'll just be here for about a minute just to find a little release throughout the hip and the low back. Arms can be wherever's comfortable, down by your side, overhead, or out like a T. Just take a couple of deep breaths here to bring that body back into balance. And take one more breath here. And then gently release, bring the legs back up through center, release the right from the left. Let's hug the left knee in towards the chest. And then gently extend the right leg out long, keeping the heel onto the floor. Take a moment just to kind of peek down, make sure the foot's in line with the hip and the toes are reaching kind of towards the sky. So the foot is a little active. Then hug the left knee in a little closer and extend the right leg, maybe just another half an inch or an inch, not much, but just enough to start to feel that front hip. And then again, we'll be here for about 3 minutes, so allow the body to start to settle in, to feel heavy and grounded towards the floor as you come back to observing the breath. And take a last couple rounds of breath here. And just start to gently rebend the right knee just a little bit so you can bring the foot towards the floor. Cross the left ankle over and let all the lower body fall over towards the right. Maybe even the left hip and low back come off of the blanket. And just take a moment of reset. And then however you'd like to get there, we're slowly going to come up and off of our prop and readjust. So if you'd like to roll onto one side and press yourself up, or however makes the most sense. You can go ahead and keep your blanket in the rolled position, but I invite you to move it up your mat just a little bit. So imagine if you were laying face down, it would be right underneath your chest at about rib height. And then I like to have an extra block towards the top, which will be there for the forehead, but if that doesn't feel good for you when you get there, feel free to take that out. But we're going to come to lay on the belly, and again, we're going to place the blanket roll right underneath the chest, right about rib cage height, and come onto the forearm, setting up for Sphinx pose. So if your blanket's not giving you a lot of feedback here, maybe it feels like you're having to actually sink into the low back to feel any sensation. A nice alternative, if you've got enough blanket roll, to fold it over. So you're creating just a little bit more support. So as you lay the upper body onto the blanket is actually holding you in the Sphinx posture rather than you pushing into the forearms or using your low back to find it. So I personally like to just sandwich the blanket roll in half, so you're creating a little bit more of a bolster. Now you can keep your head in spinal extension through the cervical, the neck region, or you can let it fall. Now if you like to let it fall, I really like to place the block on the highest setting and place my forehead right on the block. It just feels a little bit more passive and inviting. But if that feels not good for you in any way, please feel free to adjust accordingly. But make sure you feel the blanket holding you in this shape. So if the blanket again feels a little too flat, go ahead and fold it over so you've got more support. Or if your blanket's not really thick, you might need to use 2 blankets here. But hopefully we're finding this gentle sensation of an opening through the chest and the collarbones, a release through the hips and the low back, and just the tiniest little spinal extension from the thoracic region and up, being supported and held by the props. Once you feel that or have all of that, I invite you to come back to focusing on the breath, just not changing it in any way, but just simply observing. And take a couple more breaths here in this shape. If you had a block under the head, I'm going to invite you to remove that first. Slowly walk the hands closer to being underneath the chest and use the arms to push you up and back off of the blanket. Maybe taking just a minute here in child's pose, or if it feels better, a couple rounds of cat-cow, or some spinal waves, or barrel rolls, or whatever feels really intuitive and inviting into your body in this moment. And then slowly work your way back. And we're going to take this roll. If you folded it like me, just go ahead and unfold it. And you're going to place it at the foot part of your mat. And although our main physical focus today is the hips and low back, the body's really interconnected. So we're going to find a little release for the ankles. So we're going to come back to laying on our bellies. But we're going to place the front ankle hinge right on the blanket. So the feet will be just slightly elevated. And just like we bring a blanket roll under the cervical spine to meet the arch, it's going to be meeting the arch of the front of the feet. So just placing that towards the foot edge of your mat. And go ahead and kind of just loosely place the front of the ankles right there. And then come all the way onto the belly. And you can do whatever feels really comfortable for the belly. If you like stacked hands and lowering the forehead, or if you want to cactus shape the arms and come onto one side of the face, whatever feels more inviting for the upper body. Just find that gentle release for the feet and the ankles with that little bit of the blanket roll support. Which our back line of fascia connects at the plantar, the bottom of the foot, up the back of the legs, through the hips, through the low back, all the way up towards the skull, this long fascial sheet of tissue. Sometimes if we do have low back or hip pain, it's good to look downstream as well. Just finding a little bit of release throughout the foot and the ankle. And if you came onto one side of your face, I'll let you know when we're about halfway so we can turn the neck and keep that nice and even. Another thing that's nice when you're in a prone posture on the belly is you have a little bit of tactile feedback on the abdomen. So while we're here, I'm going to invite you to really breathe into that sensation. As you inhale, feel your belly push into your yoga mat, the floor, whatever you're using, giving you that feedback, that touch. And as you exhale, feel your belly draw away from the floor as the diaphragm comes back. Inhale, feel everything expand. Exhale, feel everything contract and soften. And if you were on one side of the face, I just invite you to come onto the other. And come right back into that nice tactile breath. And take a couple more breaths here. And then bring your hands in close towards your chest. We're going to leave the blanket roll where it is, and we're going to push ourselves up and sit back onto the heels just for a moment to stretch through the front of the ankles a little bit more with this nice pad of support. So just inviting in a little bit of compression through the front of the ankles, through the blanket. And then slowly release. Go ahead and just flip yourself around so you still have this blanket roll, but we're going to lay onto our backs and have that blanket roll be right in the natural curvature of the neck, if that feels okay for you. As you just come into your final relaxation shape for your practice, however you would like to close your practice off. And if laying on the back doesn't feel really comfortable for you, feel free to come back to laying on the belly, or you can lay on your side. You can even take a seated posture if that feels more inviting for you. But if you've got the blanket roll and you have anything left on the edges, I like to kind of wrap them up and around the head. So you're kind of creating like this nice cocoon. I don't know why I said it like that, cocoon, for the neck and for the sides and the back of the head. So if that feels inviting, that might be a nice way to close your practice as well. We're going to close our practice with one of my favorite pranayama techniques, which is the Brahmari breath. So it's like the M part of Om, so otherwise known as bumblebee breath or humming breath. So we'll take a natural inhale through the nose, and then we'll hum for the exhale, and we'll take 3 rounds to close our practice. So whenever you're ready, take an inhale and an exhale just to get yourself prepared. And take an inhale and Brahmari. Once you've taken 3 rounds, just let your breath return to natural rhythm. And just gently start to reawaken the body however makes the most sense for you. And if you like to roll onto one side, that can be a nice way to wake up a little bit too. And there's no rush to get there. Whenever you're ready, just coming into a seated shape. Once you get there, take a moment one final time just to drop into yourself to notice how you feel. Maybe even taking a cleansing breath just to close your practice off. I want to thank you so much for sharing your precious practice time with me. And until next time, be well.